back again, and we are not in the garage today. Just doing some editing again. And a couple of good videos coming up for you pretty soon, but today we will be returning yet again to our old friend, the Silmarillion. Not the Silmarillion, is it? Silmarillion. And as I told you, we are working our way slowly but surely through the Quenta Silmarillion. We did 1 and 2, and we're going to take a real quick look at chapter 3. Chapter 3, it's of the coming of the elves and the captivity of Melkor. We are in the office today. We're not outside in the garage. It's a little toasty out there. Here it is already after 6 o'clock at night, and 91 degrees. So I'll pass. Thank you. Really good chapter, not very long. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 pages. And this is the page where the elves wake up. Yay, those sleepyheads finally get awake. So again, I'm not going to read the entire thing to you, but I want to point out some really cool passages, some of my favorite parts of the chapter, and also just talk a little bit about the stuff that jumps out at me, eh? You know, through the long ages, the Valar dwelt in bliss in the light of the trees beyond the mountains of Aman. So the lamps, remember the lamps got destroyed and went into darkness, and Yavanna and Orome are the only two who really go roaming around in Middle-earth. They still have Beleriand at the time, so they're the only ones who are still roaming around through Middle-earth at the time. Yavanna would walk there in the shadows, grieving because the growth and promise of the spring of Arda was staged. So when everything was still lit up with the lamps, her stuff was beginning to grow. And when the lamps got destroyed by Melkor, these are not the trees, by the way, these are the lamps. There's no more light, so she kind of put everything to sleep. She sort of hit the pause button on everything growing, and this got her very upset. And then it gives us a little paragraph just telling us what Melkor's up to this whole time. In the north, he built his strength, sleeping not. He started creating all kinds of monsters. He's got his place up in the north, and he's creating all kinds of awful, horrible, evil things. Balrogs, they were named in Middle-earth in later days. And he also bred other monsters of diverse shapes and kinds that long troubled the world. Thinking like dragons, probably. But not orcs yet, no orcs. It's an orc-free zone. And then this is an important little sub-paragraph here. Melkor made a fortress and armory not far from the northwestern shores of the sea. So he's right up here in this nasty area. And that stronghold was commanded by Sauron, lieutenant of Melkor, and it was named Angband. Here's your Angbandage area. You've got Beleriand, there's Doriath, there's all the soon-to-be Nargothrond area. Angband's right up there. I've got another map I could show you. This is pretty cool. I'm going to show you. I got a desk mat. A desk mat is a gigantic mouse pad the size of your desk. So I've got Beleriand and Middle-earth right here in front of me, and I've also got it on my screen as my wallpaper. And that is a graphic that I made in Photoshop, and I cannot share it with you. The Tolkien estate forbids it, but I can make it for my own personal use. So the Valar had a council together. They all came together and brought together a council and talked over what to do about things. And the subject of this debate was essentially that Melkor's in the land, and they know that the children of Iluvatar are coming. These will be the elves and eventually the men. But the Valar don't really know yet what they're going to be like, but they know they're coming, and they're troubled because when they come, what's going to happen? Is Melkor going to be their ruler? Are they going to worship Melkor as the god if that's who they come across? This jerk out there. So should we go do something about him? And Tolkien and Omo are like, heck yeah, let's go get him. Here's Yavanna's argument. She says, "Be sure of this, the hour approaches, and within this age our hope shall be revealed, the children shall awake. Shall we then leave the lands of their dwelling desolate and full of evil? Shall they walk in darkness while we have light? Shall they call Melkor Lord while Manwë sits upon Tenequil? So Tulkas is like, no, let's go fight. And a really cool thing happens. She seemed to be focused on the part that Yavanna said, while will these folks dwell in darkness while we have light? So Varda, the the spouse of Manwë, the queen, she goes forth from the council. She looks out from the height of Tenequil. She beheld the darkness of Middle Earth. She began a great labor, greatest of all the works of the Valar since their coming into Arda. She took the silver dews from the vats of Telperion. This is, from the tree. She took silver from the vats of Telperion. They have these vats where they've been collecting the light. And she made stars. And she wrought in that time many other ancient stars gathered together, set as signs in the heavens. Wilwarin, Telumendil, Sorunume, Anarima, and Menel Makar, with his shining belt. Do you know of a guy up in the stars with a shining belt? I do. That forebodes the last battle. And high in the north, as a challenge to Melkor, she set a crown of 7 mighty stars to swing. Valakirka, the sickle of the Valar. The sickle is what people used to call the Big Dipper. They would call it the sickle. So this is the north. This is the Big Dipper in the north. The 7 mighty stars to swing as a challenge to Melkor. I love that. That is awesome. If you like astronomy and keeping track of where the stars are throughout the year and where the planets are all the time, so is Tolkien. And here's the really cool thing. Just as she finishes this work and hangs these stars in the sky, at that exact moment, the elves wake up. They awake by their lake Cuivianen. They open their eyes, and what do they see? They don't see darkness. They see the stars. It's the very first thing their eyes see is the stars above them in the sky. And this is one of the reasons they have always loved Varda. They call her the Star Kindler. And when you read The Lord of the Rings and you several times hear people say, Elbreth Gilthoniel, they are calling out to Varda, the Star Kindler, for help. Several times Frodo says that prayer when he's in big trouble. I think with Shelob, and I think when he's being attacked on Weathertop. So the elves hang out by this lake for a very long time, and as I had told you, Yavanna and Orome were in the habit of walking all throughout Middle Earth. These guys they're way, 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 way up northeast by their lake. And on a time it chanced that Orome rode eastward in his hunting, and he turned north by the shores of Helkar and passed under the shadows of the Orakarni, the mountains of the east. Thus it was that the Valar found at last, as it were by chance means it wasn't chance, those whom they had so long awaited, and Orome, looking upon the elves, was filled with wonder, as though they were being sudden and marvelous unforeseen. And they call themselves the Quendi. Their name for themselves was the Quendi, which means that they're speaking with a voice, because out of all the creatures they could find in the land around them, they were the only ones speaking with a language. So they call themselves the Quendi. And Orome loved the Quendi and named them in their own tongue Eldar, the people of the stars. But that name was after borne only by those who followed him upon the westward road. So we got a foreshadowing here, and immediately we're being told that there's going to be a westward road, and that's basically the whole rest of this chapter, is this journey that they're about to embark on. So old Orome gets on his horse eventually. He hangs out with them for a while, but then he rides very quickly back to Valinor, and he spreads the word, and he shares the news that the children have arrived. They're awake. They're here. And so then Manwë sat for a really long time, and he thought about it, and he counseled with Iluvatar in silence. And then he came back down off of his throne mountain to the rest of the Valar. He said, okay, this is what Iluvatar says. We should basically retake control of the land, and let's Let's share mastery and teach the Eldar, the Quendi. And we should bring them over here to us. We should bring them back all the way across this land, to the sea, back across the sea to where we are in Valinor. But first, we need to go take care of Melkor. So they prepared to do a battle. They started to arm their forces and muster together their power and get ready to go to Beleriand to attack Melkor. And there's a very interesting phrase in here that jumps out at you as you read it. Never did Melkor forget that this war was made for the sake of the elves, and that they were the cause of his downfall. Never did he forget the whole reason that they went after and attacked him when he had fled away was for the sake of the elves. He's going to hate the elves and the men forever. So they have a massive battle, and the Eldar, the elves, really don't know very much about what's going on. They're kind of left out of the loop. It says like they detected the shaking of the earth when it was happening, but there was just a big beatdown, massive battle. Orome, when he fights, he gets into a rage. Olmo, when he fights, he laughs his head off in his rage as he's fighting, but eventually they just overcome Melkor, and they put him in a shackles that they had made for him, basically throw him down on his face. They drag him back to Valinor. They put him on like a super tiny quick trial, and they just basically throw him into a void. And they say he's got to stay there for 3 ages. And he could sue for pardon, or he could beg for pardon again after 3 ages, but it's going to be a long time. And unfortunately, as they were raking through his place, Sauron they did not find. So Sauron escaped. All right, then the Valar were gathered in council, and they were divided in debate. This is the great debate about whether or not to bring the elves back to them to visit with them again. But at last, therefore, the Valar summoned the Quendi to Valinor, there to be gathered at the knees of the powers in the light of the trees forever. And Mandos broke his silence, saying, so it is doomed. Doomed, meaning it has been deemed. This is what he has said must happen. So at first the elves were unwilling to go. The elves were initially really scared, unwilling to go. But Arome was sent back to them because they already had a relationship with him, and he explained to them that it's going to be okay. We're going to go see the trees. We're going to go see the light. You're going to see how great everything is. And they appointed 3 ambassadors to go. These are 3 heroic, legendary elves who would be kings: Ingwe, Finwë, and Elwë. And coming, they were filled with awe by the glory and majesty of the Valar, and desired greatly the light and splendor of the trees. Then Arome brought them back to Cuiviénen, and they spoke before their people and counseled them to heed the summons of the Valar and remove into the west. So they took these 3 guys as ambassadors, but mainly as witnesses, said, look, let me show you what it's like. You go back now, you go back and tell your people. And they told them, you guys, this is awesome. We got to go. Unfortunately, this befell the first sundering of the elves. So we've got a long series of splits going to happen with the elves. They're going to continuously split and split again and split again. And every time they split, there's going to be a new name for the people who were left behind or peel off, basically. And it's really confusing. And you do not need to remember the names of all these different groups of people and different groups of elves. If you're reading this for like the first time or the second time or the third time, you're going to come across all these names. I told you that they call themselves the Quendi, but then there's going to be all these prefixes put on their names, like Calaquendi and Mora Quendi and all this other stuff. And it's descriptions of which groups they are after they start splitting up. The kindred of Ingwe and the most part of the kindreds of Finwë and Elwë were swayed by the words and were willing to depart and follow Orome. These were ever known as the Eldar, right? That's what Orome called them. But men refused the summons, preferring the starlight and the wide spaces of Middle-earth. So these are called the Avare, which means the unwilling. They stay behind. So now the Eldar prepared a great march from their first homes in the east. They all set out, their 3 armies. So the first one is Ingwe, right? Ingwe takes off. He enters into Valinor. He sits at the feet of the powers. All the elves revere his name, and he came never back, nor looked again upon Middle-earth. The Vanyar were his people, and they are the fair elves, and very few of them are ever seen again. So the very first group, which is small, follow Ingwe, and they get there, and they settle down, and they're done. Next came the Noldor, a name of wisdom, the people of Finwë. So the Noldor are, for example, you would know names like Galadriel and her brother Finrod. Those are, for example, some of the Noldor. And then the greatest host came last. These are the Teleri, because they tarried on the road. These are the slowpokes. And they were not wholly of mind to pass from the dusk to the light of Valinor. So they're going, but they're super reluctant. The Teleri are super reluctant. They're sometimes called the Sea Elves because they love water. Again, you don't have to remember all this stuff. And two lords they had, for their numbers were great. Elwë Singolo, who we will eventually call Thingol, and Olwë, who is his brother. So you have Elwë and Olwë, two brothers. Elwë, who's now he's called Singolo. Let me show you guys something. All right, so this is Thingol's entry at the Tolkien Gateway website, and you can see he's called Thingol here in his family tree. He married Melian. We'll talk about Melian in a minute. There's his brother Olwë, and then here's the thing about his names. His honorary name was Thingol. Quenya tradition names him Elwë and Singolo, for the Noldor pronounced his honorary name as Singolo. There's this long conversation I've been listening to people have in a Facebook messenger group about languages and Tengwar, about a phonetic shift from S to TH, much like our own linguistic shifts. I don't know if you guys know this, but I'm really into this kind of nerdy, goofy stuff. And yeah, I do write in Tengwar. I have learned how to write in their alphabet, and I am very interested in their languages. Here's a family tree. Here's another family tree in Tengwar. If you can read that, kudos to you. You can hit pause and read these things. So there's all kinds of, you can go deep diving into, Tolkien didn't just write a story about elves. Of course, he had to write an entire story about their languages and their phonetic shifts and linguistic shifts as time went on. So Thingol, who will marry Melian, they will have, well, let's not get ahead of ourselves. So these were the three kindreds of the elves, and they passed at length into the west. Those who went to go see the trees are called the Calaquendi. Remember, they call themselves the Quendi. So the Calaquendi means the elves of the light. They saw the trees. When they saw the trees, they are now elves of the light. The elves that did not make it, they set out on the westward march, but became lost on the road, or turned aside, or lingered on the shores. These are called the Moraquendi. The Moraquendi, Mor means dark, like Mordor is dark, like Morgoth, Dark Lord, Mordor, Dark Land, Morannon, Dark Fields or Pit or something like that. Moraquendi means elves of darkness, and it doesn't mean they're dark elves like in Thor 2. I mean, it just means that they didn't see the light of the trees with their own eyes, that's all. So they have, so let me just make this story a little shorter than it needs to be. They have a massively long journey that takes hundreds and hundreds of years, if not thousands of years. He's not particularly specific about how long the journey takes. Long and slow were the march of the Eldar into the west, for the leagues of Middle-earth were uncounted and weary and pathless. Nor did they desire to hasten, for they were filled with wonder at all they saw. Blah, blah, blah. They took forever. This is cool. You'll know this word. And it came to pass after many years of journeying in this manner that the Eldar took their course through a forest, and they came to a great river, wider than any they had ever seen. This river, it is said, was even the river which was ever after called Anduin the Great. So that's the river that our heroes in Lord of the Rings get in the 3 boats and ride down. After they've gone through Moria and Lothlorien, they get in the boats and they ride down Anduin until they get to, well, spoilers, until they get to the Argonath and then Parthgalen, and then they're beset by orcs and they split, right? So, and the departure of Boromir happens. That's all on Anduin. So this is the same river, these guys. But the mountains were the Hithaiglir, the Towers of Mist. We call them the Misty Mountains, don't we? The Towers of Mist. Eventually they get smashed up when the whole continent gets destroyed and demolished. But these mountains were reared by Melkor to hinder the riding of Rome. Now the Teleri abode long on the east bank of that river and wished to remain there, but the Valinor and the Noldor passed over it, and Rome led them into the passes of the mountains. And when Rome was gone forward, the Teleri looked upon the shadowy heights and were afraid. And he said, no, we're going to stay, we're good, we're going to stay here. And so those folks were the Nandor, again, another name for more elves than you could ever want. These guys were the ones who stuck behind. I promise you we're on the last page. At length, the Valinor and the Noldor came over the Ered Luin. That's these mountains here. In Middle-earth, after this continent is sunk, that's the mountains right here where the sea is. But that's before it's sunk, that's the gateway into Beleriand. So that's their opening into Beleriand. I don't know if you know this or not, but this is your Middle-earth map. Before, this was attached to that, connected. So this mountain range is this mountain range, and this sinks into the ocean. It's nasty. That's what happens when Valar fight. They came over the Ered Luin, the Blue Mountains, between Eriador and the westernmost land of Middle-earth, which the elves named Beleriand, and the foremost companies passed over the Vale of Sirion, which is the most important river in Beleriand. Kind of divides the continent. East Beleriand, West Beleriand. The Sirion River is the divider. They came down to the great sea between Drengist and the Bay of Balar, which is around here. When they beheld the sea, great fear came upon them. A lot of them took off, went back into the woods, and hid in the woods and said, we're not going to go. So constantly splitting off their groups. They're constantly splitting off and saying, oh, we're not going to go. And then finally, the host of the Teleri passed over the misty mountains and crossed the wide lands of Eriador. Finally caught up, being urged on by our friend Elwë Singolo, which we would call Thingol. He came across the mountains, moved over, and he got his kingdom of Doriath there. We'll get to that. That's actually the next chapter. And he was eager to return to Valinor and the light that he beheld, and he wished not to be sundered from the Noldor, for he had great friendship with Finwë their lord. Thus, after many years, the Teleri also came at last over the Ered Luin into the eastern regions of Beleriand. There they halted and dwelt a while beyond the river Gelion. So now we've got most of the elves over here. They haven't all gone across the water yet. Some of them hung back. That's fine. They can hang back too. So this is not the most action-packed chapter, other than them putting a smackdown on Melkor and putting him in jail. Basically, the elves wake up. If I had to tell you this entire chapter in a summary, the elves wake up. The Valar get worried. They go give Melkor a butt kicking and put him in jail. And then they go tell the elves, come visit us. And the elves start working their way westward, splitting off in small groups as they go, before they finally, some of them make it to the sea and some of them make it to Valinor. That's the story. That's this chapter. So next chapter will be a lot more exciting because we have a Thingol and Melian. I told you he was called Elwë Singolo, but also called Thingol. So we're going to call him Thingol pretty much from now on. He's going to marry Amaya, which is a supernatural being on the order of about like Gandalf. She's going to have an amazing ability to tell the future, and he is not going to listen to her ever, seems like. This next chapter, Thingol and Melian, is 1 page. It's like 1 page long. It's like the book of Philemon or something. And then we'll get into some cool stuff about the princes of the Eldar. So tomorrow we got a really short video because that thing is going to be a quick read. So let's move our bookmark so we know where we are tomorrow. We will be reading about our friend Elwë Singolo, aka Thingol, and his wife Melian. I don't want to spoil the surprise, but basically he finds her in the woods and a spell is put on him, and I think he stands there frozen for like 100 years. Anyway, it's going to be cool. You'll love it. Probably be back in the garage next time, but maybe not, don't know. And I got some pretty good footage. I can share you just a quick second. I'll show you something. We got some footage from Wisconsin Dane, and That's going to be really cool. He went to an air show. Look at this. Look at that. Whoa! That's going to be cool. So we will get a chance after I get this video footage edited up. We'll have a nice chance to check out Mr. Dane's footage from the air show. That's going to be really cool. So that video will be out real soon. If you're not subscribed, be sure you subscribe and hit the bell so that you get notified when I make these videos. And we will make it all the way through that book. I just want to add one more thing, which is if you are interested in more of these stories and that little 4-pager was too short, Mr. Tolkien gave us a lot more information. We can read more in Unfinished Tales, more than you could probably ever want to throw a stick at. So pick up a copy of Unfinished Tales. And there is also The Nature of Middle-earth, has quite a lot of good stuff in it along these lines. And this is excellent, The Nature of Middle-earth. And then there's Beren and Luthien, which I cannot show you because my wife has it. She's got the book somewhere. I think it's in the other room. So she's reading Beren and Luthien, but we're going to be getting into Luthien's parents, Thingol and Melian, very soon, and we will of course learn about, therefore, Beren and Luthien. And I would encourage you to get the full book where the tale is told more fully. So that's a cool recommendation. All right, I will see you guys either on the motorcycle or in the garage or in the library or something like that. Thanks for watching. I'll see you guys later. Bye.